today. Can you please tell us your name, a little bit about who you are, and your occupation?
Yes, so my name's Kim Bowman, and a little bit about me. My wife, Cynthia, and I live here with our daughter, Alice. She's 19 months old. My wife is way cooler than me. She's a pediatric orthopedic surgeon at the Shriners in Pasadena. And so what do? My civilian job is I'm a nonprofit attorney. I work for one of the legal aids here in the area, and I mostly represent older adults. Everyone that we work for is low income. And I'm also part of the team, it's known as the Disaster Assistance Team, where we help folks recover from disasters, earthquakes, wildfires. So Woolsey fire survivors were a lot of our recent work. And also trying to make good policy to prepare communities for future disasters. So it's something I think about a lot, is disaster preparation and response. My other job, as we were kind of talking about on the way over, I'm in the military. So I'm a major in the U.S. Air Force Reserve, and I spend my time either in or out of uniform in public service. That's what I do. And here in town, I do that community service by being on the Parks and Recreation Commission, as well as being co-president of the Welcome Association for all the newer residents to La Cañada. And here in the county, I'm actually also the president of the county's Commission for Older Adults, because older adults is something that I know a lot about. It's one of my personal passions.
So why are you running for city council?
Yeah, that's a good question. La Cañada is great. It's not perfect, but it's great. In particular, it's a great place to raise a family. That's why we moved here, right? We were in South Pass, and it's very nice too, but La Cañada is a great place for families. So people ask me that question, hey Kim, if you think La Cañada is great, then why run, right? Most of the time when people run, it's because they're angry about something, or I can't take it anymore, I've got to run for office. And the answer is no, it's not that. I think La Cañada is great. But when you look at our city and how we are known for being great for family, that should mean all families. That should mean all types of families. It takes a lot of effort to be here. But young families are doing it because they want to do what we are. We started our family, and we're going to have kids that are going to grow up in this beautiful place and go to these great schools. But for being so well known for family, our council and our representative government doesn't necessarily reflect that. There's only one person of the 5 elected to the council that has school-age kids. Everyone else, the kids are off in college or beyond. And so I say that's a really important perspective. People who are born and raised here, have been here for 30 or 40 years, whose kids are off and doing professional stuff now, that's a really important perspective. And I want it in my government because that's representative, right? Your government should be transparent with you, and it should be representative of you. If one of those two things isn't true, then we violated the fundamental concepts of democracy. So when I look at it and I say, gosh, we're known for young families. The median age of someone in the city is 45, but most of the folks that represent us, don't have young families. Gosh, someone with a young family should run. And so I had folks come up to me and ask me that exact thing. Hey, you seem to have energy. We like your attitude, your ideas for this future of the city. Will you run? And that was my answer.
So to make these improvements to La Cañada, what experiences do you have that would prepare you for this position?
Sure. So some of them are great experiences and some of them are not so great experiences. I'm going to be totally honest. I've had some bad experiences that I think actually will be helpful to me as well. So when I think about policy, I think about there's kind of 2 approaches here. There's the immediate stuff, the things we need to do right now, focus on right now. And then there's long-term vision. So for immediate things, I think of things like public safety. And when I say that, most people say, oh, crime, because they read the newspaper here and they see the little crime blotter. And yes, don't get me wrong, crime is an issue. There's 80-something arrests, a month here. We have crime, just like any other community does. And I understand criminal justice really well because I am a felony prosecutor. I've tried the attempted murder of peace officers and crimes against children, drug distribution. I've tried those things. I've worked with victims. So I get it. I get crime's important. At the same time, I'm not a harsh crime and punishment guy. I'm a justice person. I'm interested in justice. And so I spent 2 years of my career as an executive advisor to the chief deputy of juvenile services for probation here, the person who's in charge of all juvenile probation for the county, helping implement juvenile justice reform, right? I'm not a harsh punishment and crime guy. We need a system that takes care of people because at some point they weren't properly taken care of, and that's how they found themselves in the system. So I understand crime. I know criminal justice. I know that's important. But when I say public safety, I don't just mean crime. I'm talking about traffic. right? You all know what traffic looks like here in the morning between the hours of about 7:45 and 9, right? It's really rough because we've got all these schools, including here. This could be a dangerous place. People aren't comfortable, in particular with young kids, right? I meet with PTA parents, I meet with people, and they aren't comfortable sending their kids to elementary school by walking or by biking because we don't have sidewalks in most of the city and because traffic is crazy. The last time someone was killed in La Cañada, it wasn't a stick-up robbery gone wrong. It was someone being hit by a car while walking across the street, right? So traffic is a real public safety issue. And I think you all probably appreciate more than maybe some other people who only drive how big of a deal that is when it's tough to get around town without a car.
Yeah.
And so public safety to me means, crime. It means traffic safety. It means disaster preparation. We had a fire last night, burned an acre and a half, right? We live in a high fire area, top 15% of fire danger in the entire county, next to a fault line.
Yeah.
Well, disaster preparation is something, as we talked about, I think about a lot because I've seen what happens to communities and how difficult it is when you don't prepare properly to recover. So I'm a fan of you put an ounce of preparation instead of paying for a pound of solution. And this is one of those spaces I say, unfortunately, I've had some experience. In the military, I've been involved in a couple of real front page of the news emergencies, including when an F-16 went down, an armed F-16 crashed in Riverside County, and I was on the crisis team for that. Or January of 2020, when COVID, before it was called COVID, so this is before we were really dealing with it. It was all in China, we thought. We had to evacuate all of the Americans out of Wuhan, China, and we started putting them in airplanes and getting them out of there because that was the hotbed. And the first plane of Americans out of Wuhan landed at my Air Force Base. And I was one of the people on that first crisis team, working with the CDC and public health and state, federal, local, everybody working on this thing that we didn't understand that we later called COVID. I've been in the Incident Command Center. I've been in the Emergency Operations Center. I've been in front hand. I know what level steady leadership can do when an emergency strikes. And so you want to know that your government is prepared and thinking about how to prepare, but you also want to know that if that phone call comes, the people who work for you as your representatives are ready to respond to an emergency. So that's just an example of public safety. That's one little slice of this big pie of stuff the city deals with, and you can see how intricate that could be, how many pieces that we have to be thinking about. But I think my experience, my background makes me well suited to it.
So with these experiences, what would be your top objectives if elected to City Council? Would that be public safety? And how would these objectives affect students like us?
Yeah, so I think that the broad swath of public safety is an example of effective service delivery, right? We all, you're all taking government, you have, right? We have a social contract. We have an agreement that we work together to take care of certain common things and we don't leave it to outside industry or something like that, like public safety. That includes fire and emergency and peace work. Those are the kinds of things that I think are important. I worry about our infrastructure, right, in case of a fire. We have aging equipment. I think one of the reasons that the Los Angeles County Firefighters Local has endorsed my campaign is because they see that I get it. I get that we have this issue and that we don't have enough resources to really tackle a major emergency if it came to that, right? We've gotten lucky in the past. The wind shifted at the last minute or that kind of thing. No guarantees that we'll be lucky next time. So what can we do? We prepare the things that we can because I can't affect the wind. We do affect our preparedness. That said, it's clearly not the only issue. We talk about how do these things affect younger people. At the early outset of the campaign, I reached out and I started talking to younger people for the exact reason that we're talking about now, that what we do will absolutely affect the La Cañada that you live in for the next couple of years. But the long-term plans we make will affect the one you all come back to when your own time comes to settle down, buy a house, and start a family and whatever that looks like. So your input today matters for the La Cañada that we're gonna have in 10 and 20 years. And part of the reason having a young family perspective is important is because I'm thinking every day about what does our decision-making now do to our future in 10 years. So that's why I'm thinking about environmental preservation, natural stewardship. That's why I'm thinking about what role can we play to mitigate, not end or prevent. We're past a lot of those action points, but what can we do to help mitigate the worst impacts of climate change on an individual basis and as a community? The government has a role in that, and we definitely can be doing more. I don't think plans should be written and shoved on a shelf. We have to act, and there's a lot the city can do. There's not one thing we can do. There are 1,000 little things we can do that add up to real change in a climate emergency. That's one example. But I'm also going to talk about things like age is a continuum, right? Aging's the one thing we're all doing together. I mentioned older adults is something I know a lot about. When I was 19, I wandered into a gerontology class because I needed a credit, and I didn't even know what gerontology was. It means the study of aging. But I fell in love with it, so I studied as an undergraduate. My first job out of college, I worked at an area agency on aging, working on programs that help people stay in their home as long as possible. I worked there while I got my MBA. Then I went to law school, and I studied older adult stuff. And then I got a second master's degree at SC this time in gerontology, because aging, and in particular older adult issues, are something I'm really interested and passionate about. 25% of our city is 18 or younger. You all. But 25% of our city is 60 or older. For you all, we all came here, right? I moved here because of you all, because of what you all have accomplished shows me what my daughter could have someday. The kids I don't even have yet could have someday is what you all have. And for you, we have schools and parks and programs. But for people 60 and older, we don't have aging services. We don't have a senior center. We have very little that we've done to plan for this older adult population, and it gets bigger every year. People don't leave La Cañada unless they're going off to school, and then eventually they come back, right? Between 2010 and 2020, our census numbers changed 15 people, 1-5. Yeah. Not a big fluctuation in the number of people, but the population got older because people aren't leaving. So I think one of our responsibilities as a younger generation, right? I'm a little older than you all, maybe a little more than a little. But part of our responsibility as those under 40 millennials and generations below is to start thinking about how are we going to be really able to help take care of. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way. I mean in the way that they did so much for us. How do we do right by them, our older adults and the populations that have come before us? They laid all this groundwork for this beautiful city. What do we do to help support them so that they can stay here as long as possible? And that includes building a new senior center.
On this idea of long-term progress and aging, what would the ideal long-term progress of La Cañada exactly look like?
Ooh, I've got to close your eyes. I want you to imagine. I say to you, the center of town. Now, some people go, well, town center, it's a Target. It's over here, right? But when you tell people I live in La Cañada, do they close their eyes and think of Target? Of course not, right? We have an oak tree in our city logo, for goodness sake. They think of green spaces and good schools and a nice community. That's La Cañada. But what we don't have is that reflected in a community space. We have a 70-year-old community center. The district's administration building, parts of it are falling apart, single pane windows, old structure. It's a middle school that we're using as an administration building. There are still lockers in the thing, right? That real estate, those lockers are worth like $20,000 each because of how important that intersection is. So I look at it and I say, we have a center of our community that we're not using very well. So what should we do? I talked about short term. We got to immediately act on things like public safety, preparedness, traffic issues, right? Some of these other issues we've been talking about. Long term though, I want us to reimagine the center of our community. So you go where the seniors, or where the community center is, where the school district administration building is. You've got Cornishan running right down the middle. There's FIS, the fields. I want us to spend the next 10 years completely reimagining that space to be a new center of the community. That includes a new community center, right? One that's 21st century. That includes a new district administration building that is actually supposed to be an administration building, not a middle school. Again, solar panels, double pane windows, a proper space for the things that we're using them for. That community center should have a senior center in it. And with all the redevelopment, we're going to be able to repurpose those spaces because the community center is not in a great footprint. The school's certainly, the administration's certainly not in a good footprint. By repurposing the space, you regain that ground. You don't even need Cornishan if you redo this thing right. That's where new fields go because we don't have enough athletic fields, right? That's where a dog park can be because other cities of our size and in this area have dog parks and we don't. That's where you could start to reimagine the center of the community. And it's going to take us 10 years to get the community input and the planning and the engineering and the funding all figured out. But we can be smart about stuff like that. And if we start today, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. We start planning for it today, and in 10 years, when you all come back, when you all move back home, if you choose to, there'll be a center of the community that when you close your eyes, it's not Target, it's this. And it's within walking distance to shops, biking distance to the other things on the other side of town, right? There's already shuttle stops there. By putting a senior center there, we open up opportunities for federal, state, and county money to help us with this project, right? There's creative ways to do this stuff, but it's not going to be easy. And if you never start, you never finish. So we all need to decide, in 10 years, do we want to have an 80-year-old community center and still no dog park and no senior center? Or do we want to start working now so that in 10 years we cut the ribbon on this brand new community space and that my daughter and our family gets to take a clean vehicle there?
Yeah.
That's a long-term vision, and it includes older adults. Because one of the things we desperately need in this town is housing for older adults that's specific to older adults.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, then they either have to age in place, sometimes very unsafely, and people get hurt, or they buy a condo in Pasadena, and we lose all their experience, their years here in town. And then where do new people come to move? If someone's staying in their house for 50 years, that makes housing stock really difficult. So that nice young family that wants to move here and put their kids in our schools, where do they go to live? But if we have older adult specific housing and service options and planning in place, just like we're talking about, they sell that house. They get to keep their tax rate from 1970, whatever, when they bought their house. They get to have a nice condo that's in the center of this new community that is within walking distance and a predetermined service plan. And then that family moves into that house. They pay 2022 rates and they put their kids in our schools, and the circle of life continues, aging across the spectrum, because La Cañada needs to be an inclusive place good for people at every stage of life. That's the vision.
So with these changes, how do you view the wider impact of local politics and the outcome of city elections like these?
Yeah, I mean, what I just laid out for you is a vision that we could have started 5 years ago, but we didn't, right? It's a vision that if we wait 5 years to start until someone else comes along to start fighting for it, then we will lose 5 years. Everything costs more money in 5 years, as we're learning with inflation. And then in 5 years, how many people got left behind? Right? It's not just the opportunity or the money. You really do say, how many people in 5 years would be left behind by not taking care of our common community? I think La Cañada sometimes is thought of as a bedroom community by people who don't live here. You would get, adults would get in their car and they'd drive to downtown and then they'd come home to La Cañada. We're not a bedroom community. We're just a community. Mm-hmm. And I have an office, but I almost never go to it now. I work almost exclusively from home. You all spend 95% of your lives here in the city, right? The places you eat and you shop and you go. Your job is to go to school right here at the high school. You don't leave town. This isn't a bedroom community, it's just your community. So it absolutely makes a difference to the people that live here. And if we can do a good job setting examples for other communities, that can make a big difference. It's not a coincidence that we started our schools at 8:30, and then a state law was passed by someone who lives here and is now in the state Senate representing us and a bunch of other people. And now the whole state is adopting our good idea because data, science, and our experience demonstrated its value. We can be leaders in a whole bunch of things if we choose to be. Sometimes I feel like we don't. And part of that can be because we're not bringing all the different perspectives to the table and making decisions. But policy should be a reflection of the people who have those experiences and expertise. And your government needs to be a reflection of the people that they govern.
So in local politics, what is the best way for students to get involved?
Well, if you're 18, vote. This is, for a lot of folks, the first time they're going to be able to vote, and I really hope that people do. The ballots are here, and June 7th is just around the corner. I really hope people make the most of their opportunity to vote. It makes a big difference, especially, again, we talk about the impact of local races. About 10 years ago, a school board race was decided by 12 votes. It happens, right? It's not just hanging chads in Florida and stuff. It's here. It's now. So voting is important. I also think that the way you all found out about me and my campaign was you talked to another student, because students are engaged. Their activism in our community matters. Going to city council meetings, writing letters, paying attention to the issues. Absolutely, your voice should carry, even if you can't vote, which is why one of the early things I did in my campaign was hold a youth town hall. Only for younger people. I said, I want you to come and tell me what you think about things so that you have a voice now, because you do live here. You're 25% of the city. And the only way you get to have a vote, sometimes, if you're not 18, is through your expression, through your word, to convince and to talk with the people who do have that vote. So I'm hoping all of you go off, and even if you don't have the ability to vote, you're talking to the people who do. You talk to your family, you engage with politics, you engage with these questions. It won't be long before it's your turn. And I don't mean to vote, because yes, and it's a product of time, right? You live long enough, you turn 18, you get to vote if you want to. But I'm talking about it's your turn to lead, right? Whatever campus you're on, whatever positions you take after, whichever cities and towns you decide to settle in, you are leaders. And so I don't think you should wait. One of the things people say, gosh, he's only 37. He's too young to be on the city council. You have to live here 20 years before you can be on the city council. Well, heck no, because if we followed that rule, you'd never have a young family. You'd never have the perspective of all these people who live in town. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but you'd be missing all these great opportunities. And so I'm expecting that you all are going to go wherever you go, and you're going to be leaders. And that while you're here, before you go wherever that is, and maybe before you even come back, and when you do come back, what kind of city you want to be involved in, you're helping set the tone in those conversations now. That's what I think.
Kim, something that you said really interested me. You talked about how Walking Yada needs to be a community for all types of families. So what specifically is blocking that right now, and how exactly do you want to fix that?
Yeah, so one of the difficulties we have, I mentioned, for example, a low housing stock, right? It's tough to move here in part because we're built out. There's not a lot of place to put new houses, and it would be very expensive to try. So with the people who do have houses, if we're not turning them over periodically, then it makes it difficult for new families to move in with those new perspectives. It's expensive to live here, right? And so having only one type of housing option is a bad fit. And I talked about older adults as an example. If they had another option where they could live here in housing that was more specifically geared to their phase of life, then they'd be able to do so much longer, safely, and maintain their community ties while freeing up housing stock. So that's an example. There's one other piece of this though. We really don't have a lot of housing options that aren't single-family housing. And older adults is a great entry point to figuring out what does La Cañada want housing to look like. But let's also be clear, the state government is starting to come in with mandates, rules, changes that say we need to be in a position to be more flexible, that single-family housing is not the only way forward. Those are state rules that are coming down. The city can't override the state. That's not how the layer cake with law works. They decide things that we have to follow. But part of the reason that's so difficult for us is because we have not envisioned a future that involves anything beyond single-family houses. So my big mantra here is, if you want to set policy at a local level, you can, and the state can override it. But if you want to make decisions, if we come together as a community, if we act, we could put in place housing options that we like, that are a La Cañada idea, because we as a community decided what we wanted them to look like and where, and we recruited the developers, and our zoning code is 40 years old. It looks like Jenga. It looks like people are taking pieces and moving it around. The whole thing's ready to fall over. We need to rewrite the zoning code because it's been 40 years. What La Cañada do we want in 40 years? Let's write that zoning code to match the city that we want to have. If we start working on that now, if we drive the train rather than waiting to be run over by it, that's something we could do. And it would mean that we get to decide what kind of housing options we want here. And then if in 5 years or 10 years the state says, hey, you know where you put that 2-story older adult community with mixed retail below it in this park setting? We want that to be 10 stories. It's too late. We already did it. They can't tell you to tear down the building and add 10 stories. But if we don't do anything, if we just leave it the way it is, in 10 years they might come back with a rule saying, hey, density is this now. Right? So if you want a say in what the community should look like, let's drive the discussion, not wait to be responsive to it. Just like disaster prep. An ounce of preparation is worth a pound of solutions here.
How would you summarize the Kim Bowman campaign, or who you are, in just one word?
One word?
One word.
Woo!
One word.
Golly. I would say dedicated. I'm going to be a La Cañada parent for a long time. I'm going to be a La Cañada resident for even longer. I am dedicated to the community and making sure that it is as good as it can be. And that means that you've got to be thinking about all of the folks, an inclusive line. You can't just say, well, you know, this policy geared towards these folks. I think you can take a holistic view and say, can we build an inclusive, welcoming place? I think we can. I'm not saying it's not great, I'm saying it can be better. And so I'm dedicated to the community and to making sure that we fulfill those best, highest ambitions.
So now that we know a little bit more about your campaign and what you stand for, how can the youth get more involved with your campaign specifically, and how can people find out more?
Yeah, so ballots are in the mail. If you're 18, vote. You can visit kimbowman.com. It's my website where I've got, ideas and videos and all kinds of things. You can tell me your ideas. So 3 days a week, I'm at the same coffee shop. I sit there, and sometimes people come and yell at me, and sometimes people come tell me their ideas. I've got a dozen more meet and greet and other events coming up between now and when the election is. And so I'm hoping that people are taking advantage of the opportunity to get to know the people that they're talking about electing. And, people put up signs and they pass out literature and they talk to their family and they talk to their friends. I think that's an incredible opportunity for people to make a difference. Is just tell the people that you care about, here's who I'm supporting and here's why. Here's what I heard that I'm compelled by. I think that makes a big difference in a campaign, especially something like this. But what's important to me also is not just like, okay, June 7th happens and then, all right, time out, don't talk to me anymore, don't tell me your good ideas. I've committed that I'm going to continue to have public office hours, right, where I'm going to sit somewhere, use probably the same coffee shop, every week, I'm going to sit there. I'm taking time off work now. I'm going to continue to adjust my schedule, so I'm reducing the number of hours I work every week so that I can spend those hours focused on city. And I'm going to sit there, and I want people to come tell me what they think, what they like, what they're unhappy about. I want you to have a space where you can say, I have the guy's number, I'm just going to text him. I want you to feel like you've got that relationship with government, because you should. I honestly think that you should. If the government's not transparent and representative, we're doing it wrong. So I want to be transparent with you about what I'm going to do, why I'm going to do it, and I want to be representative, which means I want you all help me get elected, please. Tell your friends, tell your family. But once we've won, you got to help me do the job too, right? It's not just me with. I guarantee you, I do not have all the good ideas, but I'll bet you all do.
All right.
Thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate having the opportunity to interview you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, that's a wrap.
Hey, all right.